Some said that there's a need for more time. Others said, absolutely not, we don't want a democratic system. Social media, a lot of talk about social media, that people felt they had moved their political activism to the social media site. This is before, in the last 6 months, obviously, we've seen that social media has been targeted by the state. So that's, things are changing there again. And then the issue that there is no distinction between government and the state. We were always told about whoever's in government's actually not providing us with the things we need. So there are actually 3 themes which came out, and people didn't fall neatly into one or the other category, but 3 views which came up. The first one was, Pakistan's in a mess because we are not following the right kind of Islam. And some said Islam's not compatible with democracy. Some disagreed with that view. But across the provinces, across rural and urban areas, young people kept on going about the right kind of Islam. Some then defined as saying the right kind of Islam is non-sectarian. Others disagreed with that as well. I've got a few quotes here for you. So I see my role very much as just bringing you those quotes. I'm not trying to sort of impose my analysis on this, but these are examples of what we heard again and again and again. We have dozens of these. We need the right kind of Islamic education. We don't know who is the right scholar, who is going to give you the right translation, what is the true version, who do we believe. If we actually were on the right path, we would not be in the mess that we are today. These are, as I said, this is not just educated people in universities. We heard this in schools as well, but the quotes I have here, actually those are school quotes from teenagers in schools. The second thing which came up a lot was, so this is a picture from Peshawar, from the Peshawar school massacre, foreign elements. We are controlled by foreign elements. And I heard this again and again, and I heard this also actually from 2009 when I was living in Pakistan at the time, where America was blamed for, we had a bomb a day. Somewhere in the country there was a bomb a day. Actually, Karachi was quite quiet, but the rest of the country had regular attacks. And I was hearing it all the time. It's America, it's India. This has increased. So very specifically with the Peshawar tragedy, but we have it for terrorist incidents from across the country, young people tend to think that it's raw and it's America. So young people's views are not very pro-democracy, at least not the hundreds of young people that I tend to speak to. And as I said, I don't tend to speak to only middle-class youth who are in universities. I go into schools, I go into rural areas, I spend time in low-fee private schools, but also in philanthropic schools and government institutions across the country. It is more restricted now. I'm no longer allowed into Balochistan, but I still do work in KP. This has emerged into something which Tanya and I are writing on about now, which we call the national narrative, which has been called the national narrative. And increasingly we find also when we speak to young people, they say they might be very pro-army, they might be very pro-military court, but they also say you can't actually criticize the army. The role of the army can no longer be questioned. And people who critique the army are labeled anti-patriotic, and it's a political suicide. And all those of you who have a Pakistani mobile phone SIM card, like I have, will have received the text message saying that if anyone is committing blasphemy, please report them. Blasphemy online. So in many ways, social media has now been hijacked. So whilst social media between 2009 and 2014 was seen as an arena where there was a level of political engagement, to a certain degree that has been reduced because now any kind of criticism, be it considered blasphemy or be it considered anti-national, carries severe consequences, as we know what happened to the bloggers, and there's increasing self-censorship. I've got a few friends of mine who are in the media, and they find that it's very difficult to actually write about what they want to write. And a last bit, which is where education is starting to play a part in discrediting democracy, where we find even across universities there is a discourse where democracy as a system is being questioned. So is it, where's the chicken and the egg? Where did it all start? So I'll just conclude on saying that really, actually, the issue that we're facing today is the relationship between individuals and the state. I'm not actually sure that democracy, we always seem to think from here that democracy would be the ideal system. I don't necessarily think that's right. But there needs to be a reasonable relationship between individuals and states. And young people need to feel that their rights are met and that they don't, that their community and families are taken care of. The problem is obviously low political literacy and low confidence in public institutions. And actually political parties really don't help. I mean, we've seen the way that PTI has actually been unwilling to work with the institutions. I mean, Christine spoke about that earlier on, and how they've been trying to force in early elections. So not even the political parties don't believe in the institutions, so why should the young people? And on that, I'll conclude. Thank you.
Khalid Nadeem, South Asia Middle East Forum. Thank you, Professor Mary. I'm very interested in your presentation about education in Pakistan. What's the access for poorer people and lower middle class people and the opportunities they have? Because I understand that there's very restricted, they feel quite that they haven't got the opportunity to go very far, even if they do a degree. I mean, how do you see them succeed, that particular class succeeding? I'm talking about the lower middle class and the poor in an urban area like Lahore.
My name is Shahzada Hayat. I'm an international community welfare activist. I believe in peace and I believe in unity, in humanity, and that's the fundamental thing to go forward with. And I care for all the communities. But what I would like to state here is talk about democracy, because that's what the subject is all about. But democracy, Professor, on whose terms? Do we follow the democracy of the United States of America? Do we follow the democracy of Russia? Do we follow the democracy of Saudi Arabia? Do we follow the democracy of Burma? Do we follow the democracy of China? Who do we follow? Or do we follow the democracy of Iran? The fact of the matter is, it's this democracy that we really need to understand and not shout about it. For 70 years, since the creation of the partition of Pakistan, whether you call it divide and rule and call it what you may, for 70 years, United States of America, its main ally, one of the best allies America has always had, sir, is Israel in the Middle East and Pakistan in the South Asia. Now, what has happened? All this has been going on for 70 years. What has changed now? The old guards and the old people have died. The new people, the new academics have taken over. The difference is this. For 70 years, America has been supporting Pakistan and giving it arms, sophisticated arms, and here are, go and destroy India. And at the other end, Russia has been giving arms to India and saying, here you are, go and destroy Pakistan. Well, it has changed now in the recent 4 or 5 years, particularly perhaps in the Trump era. Now it's different. Russia is giving arms to Pakistan to say, go and destroy India, and America has given the F-16 to Pakistan to say, go and destroy Pakistan. So these are the things that are causing the biggest problems. Now, you mentioned about the army of...
Please be brief.
Yes, sir, I have to, because I'm sure that people will allow me to talk. Sir, I'll do quickly as fast as I can. Sorry? Sir, I'll go as fast as I can.
No, please.
Sir, I'll go as fast as I can. Okay, my next issue is, sir, the Pakistan army is the only thing in Southeast Asia, in Pakistan, that's holding on tight, because there are many factions that want to come in and take over, and if you remove the Pakistan army back and you bring in these politicians, then do you want Iran in Southeast Asia? Do you want these problems? Because Pakistan army has been taking instructions from the United States of America for 70 years. It's the biggest ally. Sir, one point I would like to make, sir, that if you get... I'd like to, sir, finally, I'd like to come back to this gentleman, sir.
Can you please give me the mic?
Finally, sir, I'd like to come back to this gentleman. Last 1 minute, 30 seconds.
No, there are other people who want to ask questions. All right, quick one on education. So I wasn't quite sure if you're asking about opportunities to access higher education or access jobs after higher education. I'll just say both. Okay. So it has access to higher education for lower middle classes has vastly improved, but the quality that they access is quite low. So the access has increased, but the quality is low. So accessing government colleges and so on has improved. Getting a job afterwards is virtually impossible. So this is where the bottleneck is. It's a lot of the young people you speak to, even if they've actually gone and done a degree, they cannot get a job afterwards, which is where, this is where the problem lies. And that's something which the state hasn't addressed. So whilst quantity, access has been increased, quality has not, and outcomes to where you go afterwards has not. I won't say very much about you, but I just want to say China isn't democratic, and neither is Burma. China is totally separate, but Burma is a participatory system. Although they call it democracy, it's not a democracy, but I'll let Christine answer that.
I'm going to point you to a really fabulous book. It's a scholarly book written by Dennis Cox. In fact, the U.S. has not had this relationship with Pakistan. We've had a very on and off relationship. In fact, more off than not. Although I will agree with the fundamental point that every time there has been a military coup in Pakistan, the American government, and I have written against this very vociferously to anyone who cares to read, we have unfortunately funded those military dictatorships. But this idea that we are doing the things that he has said, this is empirically falsifiable. Dennis Cox has a great book, another great book, but I'm sure that the planted individuals in the audience will howl. Hossein Haqqani's book, Magnificent Delusions, is also a very solid and detailed history of this problematic relationship, which is not at all as we have heard. It's problematic in different ways, but not as he has described.
Dr. Crawley, 1 second. I would be remiss if I don't thank Lord Bruce for his excellent conspectus. Dr. Lord Bruce, when you mentioned it at the beginning of Jinnah's Cairo 46 visit, that is, of course, his only visit to Egypt when he returned back. But what happened in the early 50s with King Farouk, one day in repartee, as he said to one of his courtiers, and because this ties up with Dr. Lal's point of what Islam and whose ideology of Islam, and in the repartee he mentioned to him, young man, be quiet, didn't you know that Islam was born on the morning of Thursday morning, 14th August 47?
My name is Taimur Iqbal, journalist from Prime TV. Nawaz Sharif, because the man has always intrigued me. Back in 2010 or 2011, when 18th Amendment was being discussed, two options that were basically propositions that were floated by PVP, repealing or amendment of 62, 63, and the oversight of the nomination of superior judges by Parliament, both options were effectively blocked by Nawaz Sharif. And unfortunately, both have come back to haunt him. So that gives me a very clear impression that Nawaz Sharif is not a genuine Democrat. And Dr. Christina, while talking about Nawaz Sharif, perhaps forgot to mention that the man has himself been responsible for undermining democracy in Pakistan, at least toppling two PPP governments when he had the opportunity. So how do you see Nawaz Sharif? Is he a true Democrat? Is he a true representative of democracy? Or is he a man who uses democracy just to promote his self-interest? And just a question for you, Dr. Fair, and Dr. Brzean, for you. Dr. Murray has talked about the narrative of the role of army and how people cannot criticize or discuss it in Pakistan. And yet when I look at the freedom of Pakistani media as opposed to the freedom of media in Muslim countries, other Muslim countries, it still emerges to me that Pakistani journalists or Pakistani media is still relatively free and fair in terms of, and I watch Pakistani channels every day, and I will tell you myself that I've seen Pakistani journalists in the talk shows, in the blogs, in the newspapers, criticizing the role of establishment and military. I would like to comment on that as well.
Nawaz Sharif must surely rue the day when given the opportunity to amend what I have called those morality clauses, his party chose not to support that move, for which, of course, he's paying a heavy price. He's not known to be a man with great farsightedness. I mean, it wouldn't just be constitutional clauses that came down on him like a ton of bricks, but his appointment of General Musharraf. Again, he's known for misjudgments. And one would have thought that, given, what he had to endure, his many years in exile, he would have learned. And indeed, if you look back to, his early months in power, returning as Prime Minister for the third time, many people talked about a changed Nawaz Sharif. But, where is that change? Some of us ask. Now, maybe, as Christine and some others have pointed out, the pressures on the man have been severe, and his room for maneuver actually extremely limited. Nevertheless, he did command one of the biggest majorities in Parliament, and another I would suggest, even more fundamental mistake made by Nawaz Sharif is that he didn't give Parliament the time of day. And, that too, he must now regret. He ran his government worse than a kitchen cabinet, basically like a small-time dynasty, like a family fiefdom. Parliament was completely sidelined. And he should have learned from this, because when there was that big dharna with Imran Khan and Tahirul Qadri, and there was, a risk at that time that so-called extra-constitutional forces would oust a democratically elected government. All the parties came together because, they imagined that this would give an institution like the army the perfect excuse. Well, you see, the political classes are squabbling again. It's time for us to come in and settle things. So, he's had many opportunities, and he's squandered them. Now, what's interesting is, and what I have tried to suggest in, I tried to suggest in my own presentation, is that these morality clauses, unless amended, will be like a Damocles sword. Christine pointed out, I think, the very important point that with Article 58 2B having disappeared, parties, sections, opinion that are instinctively hostile to the political classes, elected leadership, and there are many such institutions and groups, will now use and rely on these clauses to get rid of governments. But what I find even more intriguing than Nawaz Sharif's big blunder is Imran Khan and the People's Party now coming out of the woodwork to say that they will oppose any attempt to amend these constitutional clauses. Now, you explained to me, just turning things around, how do we make sense of that? What is going on?
We'll come back to one then.
I think that if we have learned anything from this forum is that democracy involves contestation. I think that the type of debate that took place before the break shows that there's plenty of contestation, but also requires listening to the other side and not to be tone deaf to alternative viewpoints. I think that's a very important element to having a fruitful democracy. Pakistan is an imperfect democracy, and to criticize the institutions or specific political actors does not make you anti-Pakistan. I love Pakistan. I think everybody here probably in this room loves Pakistan in a very different way, but we're not anti-Pakistan in any stretch of the imagination. We just have criticism of specific institutions, processes, and so on, and I think that's pretty unfair to suggest otherwise. As far as foreign actors and how they may intervene, I mean, I think it's quite plausible that many of the institutions, and the decay of the institutions is a result of foreign intervention, but I think that ultimately it has to be Pakistanis themselves to have to sort out these issues and not really blame others for the weakness of their own institutions, any more than I would blame my own failings as a person on my neighbors or the drug dealer down the street or William Crawley next to me. It is ridiculous to suggest that my failings are a result of those foreign influences or external influences.
I don't want you to construe my talks about Nawaz Sharif to be a defense of him. He is everything that you said. He's predatory. But I want to situate him within a system. So, I mean, the expression that I use for, so there's a historical reason, right, why democracy in Pakistan is much more challenged than India. It has to do with the roots of the Muslim League. It was rooted in North India. There was no basis for it. Some of the early decisions that Jinnah made to sideline the Bengalis in East Pakistan, he decided to make himself a viceroy. He decided to work on building the state, not the party. So there are these very real historical lineaments that I think structurally explain the deficiencies of Pakistan. It's democracy, but then you also have laid over that what I will call democracy interruptus. But I'm also going to blame Pakistanis. And so if you look at Pakistan's political culture, and this is where I think Imran Khan was a breath of fresh air in some way, although he's a problematic character. He actually began talking about policies instead of patronage. And until Pakistanis start actually expecting policies. Now, what do I mean by that? Well, patronage is a very expedient way of allocating resources in a non-democratic place. So in other words, you would rather be able to pay to get your kid into a good school than have the state deliver good education. So, but how do you link up the expectation of a polity with parties to get parties to aggregate interest? Well, this, believe it or not, comes down to tax reform. Right? The whole point of the fundament of a democracy is that the state takes money from you and you expect services in return. I have to have the same discussion to remind Americans. But until you have fundamental tax reform that links the taxpayer to the people that are taking the taxes, you're not going to get this. So I think it's become very fashionable to blame the shortcomings of these very problematic politicians, and they are problematic politicians, but they have become the point of your anger, when in fact you need to look at the entire system and how voters or non-voters relate to the people that they're electing and why they're electing them.
Okay, sir. My name is Ayaz Momand. I'm from Momand Agency FATA, and I'm solicitor. I want to ask to just Miss Professor Lil that he provided us a lots of documents on a screen that I visited Pakistan, Karachi, villages, and Lahore and other cities without any threat. And she get a lot of documents, a lots of information from our country. She can entertain everything over there, but she didn't tell us about the environment of Pakistan, and she asked about the Army Public School incident in Lahore. She didn't went to Peshawar because it's happened in Peshawar. She need to go to Peshawar and ask to the victims of Army Public School in Peshawar that what they feel after the Army Public School incident, and we provided the evidence. We provided the evidence our neighbor country about the people which embassy funding the Army Public School people to do this incident and one question from the panel.
No,
Sir, please, one question. Just one more question, sir. No, sir, just one more question.
No,
we know the jihadis. Who support jihadis? Who give them arms? Who give them monies? And after the 1989, when the Russia came back from Afghanistan, then they become Taliban and Al-Qaeda. And who make Taliban and Al-Qaeda? You better than know.
If you have the answers.
1,237 times Allah is mentioned in my holy scriptures. In Granth Sahib, Guru Nanak, the founder of the Sikh faith, had a lifelong disciple, Bhai Mardana. He was a Muslim. He was a Muslim. The point which I'm making is, I was upset, and I was really upset, right, to see a very unbalanced speakers on that stage. Speakers were totally unbalanced, right? Because this is a debate. I thought this is a debate. Debate is that we should have speakers from both sides. I was very surprised that any national or scholar from Pakistan, because there would have been many, I'm sure, who could come there. But anyway, that's different. I want to make friendship. Okay, fine. I didn't know. I want to make bridges. I want to make really bridges, right? I really want to break bridges, and I'll go very happy and sleep in peace. If you could kindly give us a slogan out of this debate, how we get around to this. There's a problem. How to get, you are learned speakers. These people, my brothers and sisters, are very agitated about their own, homeland. They're agitated. We cannot stop them. 180 million people, we cannot stop them. They are going to exist. I wish the country could be melt out as an Indian, but I can't do that. It won't melt out.
Okay, well,
what we want to know, in London, after this meeting, we are going to live together. We have to live together. Please issue a statement which should go into the magazine so that we could have, for future, how we look at this problem.
Well, thank you very much for that suggestion. It certainly brings us back to fundamentals about what we believe about society. But unbalanced or not, and I don't believe it was unbalanced, but whatever the arguments you've heard from the panel and from the floor, you can weigh against your own opinions and your own views, and I hope that they will help to inform them and judge them. But I'm very grateful to you all for coming, for the engagement with these issues, and for your contribution to them. I'm very grateful to members of the panel for their contribution and support and their learning. Please give them a round of applause.